The text arrived at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, right as I was reviewing blueprints for the Harbor Point development project. My phone buzzed against the metal desk in my construction trailer, and I glanced at the screen expecting another vendor complaint or permit delay. Instead, I saw Zoya's name and a message that made me pause my pencil mid-calculation. "I'm at my grandma's funeral. Don't call. I need time alone." I stared at the words, my mind immediately cataloging the inconsistencies. Fina Marin, Zoya's grandmother, had been in perfect health when I'd seen her 3 weeks ago at Sunday dinner. Sharp as a tack at 82, complaining about her neighbor's dog and demanding seconds of pot roast. The woman who'd raised 5 children and outlasted 2 husbands didn't seem like someone who'd go quietly. But people surprise you. Maybe I'd missed something. I saved the message to my phone's archive, a habit I'd developed during my 15 years in construction management, where every communication could become evidence in a dispute. Then I went back to my blueprints, though the numbers seemed to blur together. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Vic, my foreman and closest friend since high school. "Dude, check this out," his text read, followed by a link. "Isn't this your wife?" The link opened to a live stream on Instagram. The quality was grainy, typical of a phone camera in dim bar lighting, but the faces were unmistakable. Zoya sat at a high-top table on what looked like a rooftop terrace, her auburn hair catching the afternoon sun. She was laughing at something, her head thrown back in that carefree way she used to laugh with me. Beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, sat Beck Darren. Beck, her college boyfriend, the investment consultant with the perfect teeth and the BMW who'd somehow stayed in her orbit for the past 5 years of our marriage. The man she assured me was just a friend whenever his name came up in conversation. I checked the timestamp on the stream. 3:15 p.m., current time, 3:52 p.m. The funeral that required her complete isolation was apparently taking place at Pier 21, the trendy rooftop bar downtown, the same bar where Beck had tagged himself in a photo just 20 minutes earlier. I screenshotted the stream, saved the video clip, and checked the metadata. Location services were enabled. The GPS coordinates matched Pier 21 exactly. My fingers moved without conscious thought, typing a response to Zoya's funeral text. "My condolences." Then I opened a new message and forwarded the livestream link to Marin Hollis and Hayes Rellan, Zoya's parents. I added a single line. "Is this before or after lunch with Fina?" I knew they were having lunch with Fina today because Marin had mentioned it Sunday when we'd all been together. Their weekly tradition, every Tuesday at 1 p.m. sharp at the little cafe near Fina's apartment. My phone stayed silent for exactly 7 minutes. Then it exploded. Marin called first. I let it ring. Hayes called second. I let that ring too. Zoya's phone, according to the messaging app, showed she'd read my condolences text at 4:03 p.m. No response. I closed my laptop, locked the trailer, and drove home through the late afternoon traffic. My mind was remarkably clear, like the moment when a complex engineering problem suddenly reveals its solution. All the variables aligned, all the forces balanced. The house felt different when I walked in. Maybe it was knowing what I knew, but everything seemed staged. The coffee mug in the sink with lipstick on the rim. Zoya never wore lipstick to funerals. The black dress laid out on our bed, her favorite party dress, not mourning attire. The absence of tissues, the lack of any preparation for a day of grief. I went to my office and printed everything. The original text, the screenshots, the video clip, the metadata report. I organized it all in a manila folder, the same methodical approach I used for construction documentation. Then I went to our bedroom and began packing Zoya's belongings. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. I'd expected rage, the kind of explosive fury that makes men punch walls or throw things. Instead, I felt the calm precision of an engineer solving a structural problem. When you discover a foundation crack, you don't get emotional. You document it, assess the damage, and plan your response. I packed systematically, clothes from the dresser and closet, folded and organized by type, shoes in boxes, labeled and stacked, personal items from the bathroom, the nightstand, her desk in the spare room. I made an inventory as I went, noting quantities and condition. 3 suitcases and 4 boxes, 7 years of marriage reduced to luggage. I carried everything to the front porch and arranged it neatly beside the door. Then I went back inside and waited. My phone buzzed constantly. Marin, Hayes, even a few missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably Zoya calling from Beck's phone or from the bar trying to manage the situation. I ignored them all. At 6:30 p.m., a car pulled into our driveway. Not Zoya's Honda, but her parents' silver Lexus. Marin and Hayes got out, their faces grim. Behind them, in the passenger seat of a second car, I could see Fina's distinctive silver hair. Very much alive Fina, who was supposed to be having her funeral. I opened the front door before they could knock. "Dean," Marin said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "We need to talk." "I figured you might," I replied, stepping aside to let them in. "Coffee?" Hayes shook his head. He was holding his phone, and I could see the live stream still playing on his screen. "Is this real? This video?" I handed him the manila folder. "Everything's documented. Timestamps, location data, screenshots. You can verify it yourself." Marin opened the folder with shaking hands. Her face went pale as she flipped through the pages. She said Fina collapsed this morning, that she was rushing to the hospital. "Fina's in your car," I pointed out, looking pretty spry for someone who collapsed. "She's furious," Hayes said quietly. "When we showed her the video and told her about the funeral text, she said some things about Zoya that I can't repeat." I nodded. Fina had never been one to mince words. "Where is she now?" Marin asked. "Zoya? I assume still at Pier 21 with Beck. Her bags are on the porch." They both looked toward the front door, then back at me. "You're throwing her out?" Hayes asked. "I'm giving her what she wanted," I corrected. "Space, time alone, just not in my house." We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, I could hear Fina's voice through the car window, sharp and indignant. She was probably giving Beck a piece of her mind, even though he wasn't there to hear it. "What happens now?" Marin asked. "That's up to Zoya," I said. "She made her choice. Now she gets to live with it." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Dean, it's me. We need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding." I showed the message to Marin and Hayes. Marin closed her eyes. 7 years, she whispered. 7 years of marriage, and she throws it away for that man. "She threw it away the moment she lied about Fina," I said. "The rest is just details." Hayes stood up. "We should go. Fina wants to speak with Zoya when she gets home." "She's welcome to wait," I said, "but she might be here a while." They left through the front door, pausing to look at the neatly arranged luggage on the porch. Marin touched one of the suitcases, then pulled her hand back as if it had burned her. I watched from the window as they drove away, Fina's car following behind. The old woman's profile was rigid with anger, her jaw set in a way that reminded me of Zoya when she was determined to win an argument. Except this time, there was no argument to win. Just a live stream, a lie, and a grandmother who was very much alive to witness her granddaughter's deception. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. "Please call me. I can explain everything." I deleted the message without responding. At 8:15 p.m., Zoya's Honda pulled into the driveway. I watched from the living room window as Zoya sat in her car for nearly 5 minutes, staring at the luggage on the porch. Her phone was pressed to her ear, probably calling her parents, or Beck, or anyone who might help her navigate this situation. When she finally got out of the car, her movements were careful, calculated. She'd changed clothes since the live stream. Gone was the casual top and jeans from Pier 21, replaced by a black blouse and dark pants. Funeral attire, though she was about 6 hours too late for the performance. She approached the porch slowly, her heels clicking on the concrete walkway. I could see her examining the luggage, checking the tags, probably hoping this was some kind of elaborate misunderstanding. The doorbell rang. I opened it before she could ring again. "Dean." Her voice was steady, but I caught the slight tremor underneath. "What's this about?" "Your grandmother's funeral," I said. "How did it go?" Her eyes flickered. Just for a moment, but I saw it. The micro-expression of someone caught in a lie, trying to calculate the best response. "It was difficult," she said. "Very emotional. I'm still processing everything. I bet. Must have been especially hard having it at Pier 21. The color drained from her face. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot. Her image, clear as day, laughing beside Beck on the rooftop terrace, the timestamp visible in the corner. "Your condolences text was very touching," I said, "though I think you meant to send it to someone else." She stared at the screen for a long moment. I could almost see the wheels turning, searching for an explanation that would make this go away. "Dean, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You've always been creative." "It's not what it looks like. It looks like you lied about your grandmother's funeral so you could spend the afternoon with your ex-boyfriend. What exactly should it look like?" Her composure cracked slightly. "Fina's fine. I know that. But Beck was going through something and he needed—" "Beck needed you to lie to your husband? It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. A few hours, that's all. I was going to tell you later that the funeral was postponed or something." I nodded slowly. "Except your parents were having lunch with Fina when I sent them the live stream." Her face went completely white. "You sent it to my parents?" They were concerned about their granddaughter's sudden funeral, especially since they'd just seen her an hour earlier, complaining about her neighbor's dog. Zoya leaned against the doorframe. "Oh, God." "Fina was particularly interested in the video. Your parents said she had some colorful commentary about your afternoon activities. Dean, please, let me come inside. We can work this out. Your bags are packed. Your inventory's in the top suitcase. Everything's accounted for. You can't just throw me out of my own house. It's my house. The mortgage is in my name. You're welcome to check the deed." She stared at me, and I saw something shift in her expression. The pleading gave way to something harder, more calculating. "This is about Beck, isn't it? You've always been jealous of him." "I've never been jealous of Beck. I've been married to you. He's successful. He has money, connections, things you'll never have. He also has a gambling problem and 3 maxed-out credit cards. Your friend Kendra ran a background check last month." That stopped her cold. Kendra was my sister, a private investigator who'd never liked Zoya. I'd asked her to look into Beck after he'd started showing up at too many of our social events. "You had him investigated?" "I had him researched. There's a difference. Turns out Mr. Investment Consultant has been investing other people's money in poker games and sports betting. His clients are starting to ask questions." Zoya's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face went even paler. "That's probably him now," I said, "wondering why your parents are calling him, asking about funeral arrangements for someone who's very much alive." She looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd known her, Zoya seemed genuinely scared. "Dean, I made a mistake, a stupid, thoughtless mistake, but we can fix this." "We?" "I'll apologize to my parents. To Fina, I'll make this right. You'll apologize for lying about your grandmother's funeral so you could cheat on your husband?" I wasn't cheating. Beck and I are just friends. I pulled out my phone again and showed her another screenshot. This one from Beck's Instagram story, posted 20 minutes after the live stream ended. A photo of 2 wine glasses on a table, captioned, "Perfect afternoon with my favorite person." "Friends," I repeated. Her shoulders sagged. "It's not what you think. I think you've been lying to me for months. I think you've been seeing Beck behind my back." I think you got careless today and decided a fake funeral was easier than telling the truth. The truth about what? That you want out of this marriage. That you've wanted out for a while, but you didn't want to be the one to end it. So you've been pushing, testing, seeing how much I'd tolerate. She stared at me. That's not true. Isn't it? The late nights with work friends. The mysterious phone calls you take in the other room. The sudden interest in girls' weekends that happen to coincide with Beck's business trips. You've been watching me. I've been married to you. There's a difference. Her phone buzzed again. This time she ignored it. What do you want from me, Dean? Nothing. That's the point. So this is it? 7 years of marriage, and you're just going to throw it away? I'm not throwing anything away. You already did that when you chose to lie about a funeral instead of having an honest conversation about what you wanted. A car pulled into the driveway behind Zoya's Honda, Beck's BMW, the silver one with the custom rims that he was so proud of. He got out slowly, his eyes taking in the scene on the porch. "Zoya?" he called. "Everything okay?" She turned toward him, relief evident on her face. "Beck, thank God." He approached cautiously, like a man walking into a minefield, which, I supposed, he was. "Dean," he said, nodding in my direction. "Heard there was some kind of misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I replied. "Just a live stream and a lie about a funeral." Beck's confident expression faltered. "Look, man, I know how this looks. It looks like you spent the afternoon with another man's wife while she lied about her grandmother's funeral. How exactly should it look?" Zoya needed someone to talk to. She was upset about some family stuff. Family stuff like her grandmother being alive? Beck glanced at Zoya, confusion evident on his face. What's he talking about? I told Dean that Fina had passed away. Zoya said quietly. That I was at the funeral. Beck's mouth opened, then closed. For a successful investment consultant, he looked remarkably lost. But Fina's fine, he said. We saw her last week at the... He stopped, realizing what he'd just admitted. You saw her last week, I repeated. Together. It wasn't like that, Zoya said quickly. We ran into each other at the grocery store. With Fina. She was with me. We were shopping. So Beck's been meeting your grandmother. How nice. I'm sure she has some interesting stories about those encounters. Beck looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Maybe I should go. Maybe you should, I agreed. Zoya's bags are packed. You two can figure out your next move somewhere else. Dean, please, Zoya said. Don't do this. Not like this. How would you prefer I do it? Should I have waited for you to come home and pretend the funeral was beautiful? Should I have played along while you described the service and the flowers and how sad everyone was? She had no answer for that. Your parents are expecting you, I continued. Fina wants to have a conversation about your afternoon activities. I'd suggest you start with an apology and work your way up to an explanation. Beck stepped closer to Zoya, his hand touching her elbow. Come on, we'll figure this out. There's nothing to figure out, I said. She made her choice. Now she gets to live with it. I stepped back inside and closed the door. Through the window, I watched them load her luggage into Beck's BMW. It took 3 trips. The car wasn't built for moving someone's entire life. Zoya kept looking back at the house, her phone pressed to her ear again. When they finally drove away, the silence felt different. Not empty, but clean. Like the moment after you finish demolishing a structure that's been condemned, nothing left but space for something better. My phone buzzed. A text from Maren. She's not answering our calls. Fina wants to speak with her tonight. I replied, she left with Beck. Try his number. The response came immediately. We don't have his number. I sent Beck's contact information, the same details Kendra had provided in her background report, phone, address, business information, and a note about his current financial difficulties. Then I poured myself a drink and sat in my living room, listening to the quiet house. Tomorrow, I'd start the paperwork. Divorce proceedings, property division, all the legal mechanics of ending a marriage. But tonight, I just wanted to sit in the space that was mine again, without lies or live streams or fake funerals. My phone buzzed one more time. Another unknown number. "This isn't over, Dean. We need to talk." I deleted the message and turned off my phone. It was over. She just didn't know it yet. The next morning brought a steady rain that matched my mood. Not sad, exactly, but gray and purposeful. I'd slept better than I had in months, which probably said something about the state of my marriage that I hadn't wanted to acknowledge. My phone had 17 missed calls and 23 unread messages. I ignored them all while I made coffee and reviewed my schedule. The Harbor Point project needed my attention, and I'd learned long ago that work was the best antidote to personal chaos. At 7:30 a.m., Vic knocked on my door. "Figured you might need backup today," he said, holding up a bag from Murphy's Deli. Brought breakfast. Vic had been my foreman for 8 years and my friend for 20. He was the kind of guy who showed up when things went sideways, no questions asked. Built like a linebacker with the heart of a social worker, he'd talked more than one of our crew through divorces, custody battles, and family crises. "Heard from the wife yet?" he asked, unpacking egg sandwiches and coffee. 17 calls, haven't listened to any of them. "Probably for the best. Let her sweat it out." I told him about the previous evening. Beck's arrival, the luggage, the final conversation on the porch. Vic listened without interrupting, occasionally shaking his head. "So she's staying with the boyfriend?" "As far as I know. Her parents don't have his contact information, which tells you something about how secret this relationship was supposed to be." "What's your next move?" "Lawyer, divorce papers, clean break." Vic nodded approvingly. "Good. No point dragging it out." He paused. "You okay with all this?" "I'm relieved," I said, and realized I meant it. I've been waiting for the other shoe to drop for months. At least now I know what I'm dealing with. My phone buzzed. Kendra's name appeared on the screen. "Morning, sis," I answered. "Morning, brother. Heard you had an eventful evening." "News travels fast. Marin Hollis called me an hour ago. Apparently they can't reach Zoya, and they're worried about her state of mind." "Her state of mind?" Her exact words were, "Zoya's always been dramatic, but this is extreme even for her." "They want me to help find her." I laughed, surprising myself. "She's not missing. She's with Beck." That's what I told them, but they don't have his address, and his phone goes straight to voicemail. I sent them his contact information last night. They tried. No answer. His business partners say he didn't show up for work this morning. That was interesting. Beck was many things, but unreliable at work wasn't one of them. His job was the only thing keeping him afloat financially. "Maybe they went away for a few days," I suggested. "Give things time to cool down." "Maybe. Or maybe Beck's having second thoughts about being involved in this mess." Vic looked up from his sandwich. "What mess?" I put the call on speaker. "Kendra, meet Vic. Vic, my sister Kendra." "The private investigator," Vic said. "Nice to finally talk to you." "Likewise. I was just telling Dean that Beck might be reconsidering his involvement with Zoya. My background check turned up some interesting financial issues." "Like what?" "Like 3 maxed-out credit cards, 2 late car payments, and a gambling habit that his business partners don't know about. The last thing he needs is a messy affair scandal affecting his professional reputation." "So you think he might cut her loose?" "I think he might realize that a married woman with angry parents and a fake funeral story isn't worth the risk to his career." My phone beeped with another call. Marin's name appeared. "That's Zoya's mother," I told Kendra. "I should probably take it." "Call me later," Kendra said. "I want to hear how this plays out." I switched to Marin's call. Morning, Marin. Dean, thank God. Have you heard from Zoya? Not since last night. She left with Beck. We can't reach either of them. Beck's phone goes to voicemail, and Zoya's not responding to texts. Maybe they need time to process everything. Process what? She lied about her grandmother's funeral to spend time with another man. There's nothing to process except an apology. I had to admire Marin's directness. She'd never been one to sugarcoat family issues. What does Fina say about all this? Fina's furious. She wants to speak with Zoya immediately. She's threatening to drive to Beck's apartment herself. The image of 82-year-old Fina confronting Beck at his front door was both amusing and terrifying. The woman had raised 5 children during the Depression. She could probably handle one lying granddaughter and her boyfriend. I wouldn't recommend that, I said. Let them come to you when they're ready. Ready for what? To apologize? To explain why she thought a fake funeral was acceptable? Ready to face the consequences. There was silence on the other end of the line. Dean, Marin said finally, what are your intentions here? My intentions? With Zoya, with your marriage, are you willing to work through this? I looked at Vic, who was pretending not to listen while obviously hanging on every word. Marin, your daughter lied about your mother's funeral so she could cheat on me. Then she tried to gaslight me when I confronted her with evidence. What exactly would we be working through? Marriage is about forgiveness. Marriage is about trust. She broke that. People make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated deception. She planned the lie, executed it, and would have continued it if she hadn't been caught. Another silence. So that's it? 7 years and you're just giving up? I'm not giving up. I'm accepting reality. After I hung up, Vic shook his head. Family pressure? They want me to forgive and forget. Pretend it never happened. What do you want? I want to get to work and let the lawyers handle the rest. We drove to the Harbor Point site in Vic's truck, the rain drumming against the windshield. The construction crew was already there, huddled under the temporary shelter we'd erected near the foundation. 40 men and women who depended on me to keep the project moving, to solve problems and make decisions that kept them employed. It felt good to focus on concrete problems with concrete solutions. Permit delays, material shortages, weather complications, all things that could be addressed with planning and persistence. At 10 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Dean, it's Zoya. We need to talk. This whole situation has gotten out of hand. I showed the message to Vic. She's using Beck's phone, he observed. Probably. Hers might be turned off to avoid her parents. You going to respond? I thought about it. The professional part of my mind, the part that managed construction projects and solved engineering problems, wanted to gather more information. But the personal part, the part that had been lied to and manipulated, wanted nothing to do with further conversation. Not yet, I said. Let her sweat. 20 minutes later, another text. I know you're angry, but please call me. I can explain everything. Then another. Beck and I are just friends. Nothing happened between us. And another. I'm sorry about the funeral thing. It was stupid, but it wasn't meant to hurt you. I turned off my phone and focused on work. At lunch, Vic and I drove to Murphy's Deli for sandwiches. The place was packed with the usual crowd of construction workers, city employees, and local business owners. I'd been eating there for 10 years, long enough to know most of the regulars by name. Dean, called out Murphy himself from behind the counter. Heard you had some excitement yesterday. I looked at Vic, who shrugged. Small town, he said. News travels. What kind of news? I asked Murphy. My cousin Barb works at the city planning office. She heard from someone at the insurance company that your wife was seen at Pier 21 yesterday afternoon with some guy. Same day she was supposed to be at a funeral. I stared at him. How does someone at the insurance company know about my wife's funeral? Barb's friend Jenny works there. She processes claims. Someone called asking about funeral benefits for Afina Marin, but when they checked, the woman's still alive and well. Filed a complaint about someone using her name fraudulently. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Vic started laughing. She filed an insurance claim for her own fake funeral? Not her, Murphy clarified. Someone else. But they used her information and she found out about it. I felt a cold realization settling in my stomach. Who filed the claim? Don't know for sure, but Barb heard it was someone related to the deceased, someone who stood to benefit from the policy. I pulled out my phone and called Kendra. Find out if Zoya tried to file an insurance claim on Fina yesterday, I said without preamble. What kind of claim? Life insurance, funeral benefits, anything that would pay out if Fina had actually passed away. Give me an hour, Kendra said. I'll call you back. Vic and I ate our sandwiches in silence, both of us processing the implications. If Zoya had tried to file a fraudulent insurance claim, this wasn't just about an affair or a lie to cover up an afternoon with Beck. This was about money. And that changed everything. My phone rang. Kendra. You're not going to believe this, she said. Zoya called Fina's insurance company yesterday morning at 9:47 a.m. She claimed Fina had passed away suddenly and asked about expediting the claim process for funeral expenses. How much money are we talking about? $50,000. Fina has a life insurance policy that covers funeral costs plus a lump sum payment to beneficiaries. Who are the beneficiaries? Fina's children and grandchildren. Zoya's listed as one of them. I closed my eyes. So she planned this. The whole thing. Gets worse. The insurance company requires a certificate of passing before they process any claims. Zoya asked if there was any way to get an advance based on family need. She was trying to get money from her grandmother's fake funeral. $50,000 split among the beneficiaries. Zoya's share would have been about $12,000. $12,000, enough to pay off credit cards, cover rent deposits, fund a fresh start with Beck, enough to make a fake funeral worth the risk. There's more, Kendra continued. I checked Beck's financial records. He owes his bookie $15,000. Payment was due yesterday. The pieces clicked into place. Beck needed money fast. Zoya had access to potential insurance money. A fake funeral could solve both their problems, if they could pull it off. They weren't just having an affair, I said. They were committing fraud. Attempted fraud, Kendra corrected. The insurance company got suspicious and called Fina directly to confirm the claim. That's when she found out someone was trying to collect on her policy. And filed a complaint. With the insurance company and the police, there's going to be an investigation. I looked at Vic, who had gone pale. The police? Insurance fraud is a felony, Kendra said. If they can prove intent, Zoya and Beck could be looking at serious charges. My phone buzzed with another text from Beck's number. Dean, please call me. This is urgent. We need to talk before you do something you'll regret. I showed the message to Vic and Kendra over speakerphone. They know, Kendra said. Someone tipped them off about the investigation. What do I do? Nothing. Let the police handle it. Your job is to protect yourself and document everything. What about Zoya? What about her? She made her choices. I thought about that as we drove back to the construction site. 7 years of marriage, and it had come down to this. Insurance fraud and police investigations, and a husband who was more relieved than heartbroken. My phone rang again. This time it was Hayes, Zoya's father. Dean, we need to meet. Tonight. There are things you need to know about what Zoya's been doing. What kind of things? The kind that require lawyers and damage control. Can you come to the house at 7? I looked at my watch. 2:30 p.m. 4.5 hours to finish work and prepare for whatever revelation Hayes had discovered. "I'll be there," I said. "And Dean? Don't talk to Zoya or Beck before we meet. Trust me on this." The line went silent, leaving me with more questions than answers, and the growing certainty that yesterday's live stream had been just the beginning. Hayes and Marin's house sat on 2 acres of carefully manicured lawn in the historic district, a colonial revival that spoke of old money and older secrets. I'd been there dozens of times over the years, but tonight it felt different. The warm yellow light in the windows seemed harsh, and the familiar front door looked like the entrance to a courtroom. Fina's car was in the driveway. Hayes answered the door before I could knock, his face grim. "Dean, thanks for coming. What's this about?" "Come in. We're in the study." The study was Hayes's domain, lined with law books from his 40 years practicing corporate law. Marin sat in one of the leather chairs, her usually perfect composure cracked around the edges. Fina occupied the chair behind Hayes's desk, like a judge preparing to deliver a sentence. "Sit down," Fina said without preamble. "We need to discuss my granddaughter's recent activities." I took the remaining chair, noting the manila folders arranged on the desk between us. "I understand there was an insurance issue," I said. "Insurance fraud," Fina corrected. "Someone called my insurance company yesterday morning claiming I had passed away and asking about expediting claim payments." Zoya. "Yes, but that's not the worst of it." Hayes opened one of the folders. "After we learned about the insurance call, I decided to review Zoya's access to our family accounts." "What kind of access?" "She has power of attorney for Fina's medical decisions, and she's listed as an authorized user on several accounts. We set it up 2 years ago when Fina had her hip surgery." I remembered that. Zoya had insisted on handling all of Fina's medical appointments and financial arrangements during her recovery. We'd all thought it was thoughtful. "The power of attorney includes limited access to Fina's checking account," Marin said quietly, "for medical expenses and emergencies." "How limited?" Fina leaned forward. $5,000 per month, with my approval required for anything over that amount." "But approval could be verbal," Hayes added. "A phone call, a text message. We trusted her." Past tense. I noticed that immediately. "What did you find?" Hayes opened the folder and spread out bank statements. "Over the past 6 months, Zoya has withdrawn or transferred $43,000 from Fina's accounts." The number hit me like a physical blow. 43,000? Small amounts at first, a few hundred here and there, always with plausible explanations. Fina's prescription medications, physical therapy co-pays, medical equipment. "But the amounts got larger," Marin continued, "and more frequent. Last month alone, she took $8,000. For what?" "According to the withdrawal slips, various medical expenses. But when I checked with Fina's doctors, none of them had any record of additional charges or treatments." I looked at Fina, who was studying me with sharp eyes. "I trusted her," the old woman said simply. "She was my granddaughter. When she said I needed new medications or special treatments, I believed her." "Did you approve all these withdrawals?" "I thought I did. She'd call and say the doctor needed immediate payment for something or that insurance wasn't covering a procedure. I'd tell her to handle it." "But you never saw receipts or documentation?" "She said she'd bring them by later, but she never did. When I asked, she always had an excuse. The office was slow with paperwork, or insurance was still processing, or she'd forgotten them at home." Hayes closed the folder. "We confronted her about it 3 weeks ago. She promised to bring all the documentation and explain every withdrawal. Instead, she avoided us," Marin said. "Canceled Sunday dinners, stopped returning calls. Yesterday was the first time we'd seen her in 2 weeks. And yesterday, she tried to collect on Fina's life insurance. $50,000, Fina said, on top of the $43,000 she'd already stolen." Stolen. The word hung in the air like smoke. "Have you reported this to the police?" "We filed a report this afternoon," Hayes said. Elder fraud and attempted insurance fraud. The detective said they'd want to interview you as well, since you're married to the primary suspect. Primary suspect. My wife was now a primary suspect in a criminal investigation. There's more, Marin said quietly. I wasn't sure I could handle more, but I nodded. We hired a private investigator to track where the money went. Besides Kendra, someone with specific expertise in financial fraud, she found some interesting patterns. Hayes opened another folder. 31,000 of the stolen money was transferred to accounts belonging to Beck Darren. Beck. Apparently your wife's boyfriend has been having serious financial difficulties, gambling issues, failed investments, outstanding debts to some very unpleasant people. How unpleasant? The kind who break kneecaps when they don't get paid. I thought about Beck's confident demeanor, his expensive clothes and flashy car, all of it funded by money stolen from an 82-year-old woman. So Zoya was bankrolling Beck's gambling habit. And probably saving his life, Fina said dryly, though I doubt that was her primary motivation. What was her motivation? Love, Marin said, and the word sounded like a curse. She thought she was helping the man she loved get back on his feet financially. Instead, she was enabling his addiction and destroying her own family. My phone buzzed. Another text from Beck's number. Dean, call me immediately. There are things you don't understand about this situation. I showed the message to Hayes. Don't respond, he advised. The police want to monitor all communications with both of them. Are they going to be arrested? Probably. The district attorney's office is reviewing the case, but elder fraud and insurance fraud are both felonies. With the amounts involved, they're looking at serious prison time. Prison time. My wife might go to prison. What happens to me in all this? You're a victim, Hayes said. Your wife committed crimes without your knowledge. The police understand that. But I'll have to testify. Probably, about her behavior leading up to the fraud, any conversations you had about money or Beck, anything that might establish intent or pattern. I thought about all the small things I'd noticed over the past few months. Zoya's new clothes, her expensive dinners out, her sudden generosity with gifts for Beck's birthday and other occasions. Money I'd assumed came from her salary or our joint savings. She used our credit cards too, I realized, for dinners, hotels, gifts. I saw the charges but never questioned them. How much? Maybe 5,000 or 6,000 over the past few months. I thought she was just being social with her work friends. Add it to the total, Fina said grimly, along with whatever else she spent on that man. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling over us like fog. What happens now? I asked. Now we wait for the police to build their case, Hayes said, and we try to recover as much of the stolen money as possible. What about Beck? Beck's problem now is that he's received stolen money. Even if he didn't know where it came from initially, he's going to have a hard time explaining why he accepted $43,000 from his girlfriend's grandmother. Did he know? The investigator found text messages between them discussing Fina's medical expenses and how much money was available. Beck was definitely aware that Zoya was accessing her grandmother's accounts. So he's equally guilty. In the eyes of the law, yes. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Zoya's number. Should I answer it? Put it on speaker, Hayes said, but don't commit to anything. I answered the call. Hello, Zoya. Dean, thank God. We need to talk. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding? About the money, about Fina, about everything. It's not what it looks like. What does it look like? Like I stole money from my grandmother. But I didn't. Every withdrawal was approved. Every expense was legitimate. I looked at Fina, who rolled her eyes. What expenses, Zoya? Medical expenses, prescriptions, treatments, equipment. Fina needed care, and insurance wasn't covering everything. What treatments? Physical therapy, specialist appointments, medication adjustments. Which specialists? There was a pause. I don't remember all the names. There were several. Zoya, Fina said loudly enough to be heard through the phone. I haven't seen a specialist in 8 months, and my physical therapy ended a year ago. Silence on the other end of the line. Fina? Zoya's voice was smaller now. You're there? I'm here, and I'm very much alive, despite your attempts to collect on my life insurance. That was a mistake, a miscommunication. $43,000 is a lot of miscommunication, I said. Dean, please, meet with me. Let me explain everything. There are things you don't know. Like what? Like why I really needed the money. Like what Beck was going through. Like how desperate we were. Desperate enough to steal from your grandmother? It wasn't stealing, it was borrowing. We were going to pay it back. When? Soon. Beck has some investments that are about to pay off. Big returns. Enough to cover everything and more. I looked at Hayes, who was shaking his head. Zoya, I said. Beck owes $15,000 to a bookie. His investments are gambling losses, not business opportunities. Another long silence. Who told you that? Does it matter? The police know about the gambling, the stolen money, the insurance fraud. They're building a case. The police? Her voice cracked. Dean, you called the police on me? I didn't call anyone. Fina reported the insurance fraud when the company contacted her to confirm her claim. Oh, God. Where are you now? We're figuring things out. You need to turn yourselves in. Get lawyers. Try to make a deal before this gets worse. It can't get worse. It can always get worse, Zoya. Ask Beck. He'll tell you about worse. I hung up and looked around the room. 3 faces staring back at me, all wearing expressions of grim satisfaction. Think she'll run? Marin asked. Where would she go? Fina replied. She doesn't have any money left. She spent it all on that worthless man. My phone buzzed with one final text. Dean, I'm sorry. For everything. I never meant for it to go this far. I showed it to Hayes. Save that, he said. It might be useful as evidence of remorse. Evidence for what? For when she tries to blame everything on Beck and claim she was manipulated. I looked at him sharply. You think she'll do that? I think she'll do whatever it takes to avoid prison, Hayes said, even if it means destroying the man she claimed to love. Outside, rain continued to fall against the windows, washing the world clean. But inside this room, surrounded by evidence of betrayal and fraud, I felt like I was drowning in the wreckage of a marriage that had been built on lies from the very beginning. Tomorrow, there would be lawyers and police interviews and decisions about divorce proceedings. Tonight, there was just the terrible clarity of knowing exactly who I'd been married to for 7 years, and wondering how I'd been blind to it for so long. The call came at 6:23 a.m., jarring me awake from the first decent sleep I'd had in 3 days. Detective Sarah Morrison from the Financial Crimes Unit, her voice crisp and professional. Mr. Calix, we need to speak with you this morning. Can you come to the station at 9? About Zoya. About your wife and Mr. Darren. They were arrested last night. I sat up in bed, suddenly fully awake. Arrested? Attempting to cross state lines with false identification. They were stopped at a checkpoint in New Hampshire with fake driver's licenses and nearly $6,000 in cash. $6,000. Probably the last of the money stolen from Fina, saved for their escape plan. Are they in custody? They're being held pending arraignment. We need your statement about the timeline of events and any relevant conversations you had with either defendant. Defendants. My wife was now a defendant in a criminal case. I'll be there at 9. The police station occupied a converted Victorian mansion downtown, its original elegance buried under decades of institutional paint and fluorescent lighting. Detective Morrison met me in the lobby, a woman in her 40s with graying hair, and the kind of steady gaze that suggested she'd seen every possible variation of human stupidity. "Thank you for coming in, Mr. Calix. I know this is difficult." She led me to a small interview room furnished with a metal table and uncomfortable chairs. A recording device sat in the center of the table like a mechanical witness. "Before we begin, I want to clarify your status in this investigation. You're not a suspect. Based on our review of financial records and witness statements, you appear to be another victim of your wife's fraudulent activities." "Another victim?" "Besides Mrs. Marin. Your joint credit cards show approximately $7,000 in charges that directly benefited Mr. Darren. Dinners, hotel rooms, gifts, travel expenses. Did you authorize these expenditures?" "I saw them on the statements, but Zoya said they were work-related or social expenses with friends." I trusted her. Detective Morrison made a note. "Did you have any knowledge of your wife's access to Mrs. Marin's financial accounts?" "I knew she had power of attorney for medical decisions. I didn't know about the bank account access." "When did you first suspect your wife was having an affair with Mr. Darren?" I thought about that. "I didn't suspect an affair specifically. I noticed changes in her behavior over the past few months, but I attributed them to work stress or normal relationship issues." "What kind of changes?" "She was out more often, more secretive with her phone, less interested in spending time together. But she'd always been social, so it didn't seem unusual." "Did she ever mention financial difficulties or express need for additional money?" "No. Our finances were stable. We both had good jobs, manageable expenses. If anything, she seemed to be spending more than usual, not less." Detective Morrison opened a file folder. "We recovered text messages from both defendants' phones. I'd like you to look at some of these exchanges and tell me if they reference conversations you had with your wife." She slid a printed transcript across the table. The messages were dated over the past 3 months, a conversation between Zoya and Beck about money, expenses, and what they called the grandmother situation. Beck: "How much more can you get from the old lady?" Zoya: "Maybe another 10K before anyone notices. She trusts me completely." Beck: "What about your husband?" Zoya: "Dean doesn't pay attention to the details. As long as the bills get paid, he's happy." I stared at the words, feeling something cold settle in my chest. I never saw these conversations. "Did your wife ever discuss Mrs. Marin's medical expenses with you?" "Occasionally. She'd mention taking Fina to appointments or picking up prescriptions. I offered to help, but Zoya said she had it handled." "Did you ever offer to contribute financially to Mrs. Marin's care?" "Several times. Zoya always said it wasn't necessary, that insurance covered everything or that her parents were handling the costs." Detective Morrison showed me another transcript, this one more recent. Zoya: "The insurance thing didn't work. They called Fina directly." Beck: "Shit. How much trouble are we in?" Zoya: "Depends on whether Dean talks to the police." Beck: "Maybe we should disappear for a while. Let things cool down." Zoya: "With what money? We spent everything." Beck: "I've got about 6K left, enough to get us somewhere safe." "When was this exchange?" 2 days ago, the night after you confronted your wife about the live stream. So while I'd been processing the end of my marriage, they'd been planning their escape, using the last of Fina's stolen money to fund their flight from justice. "Where were they trying to go?" "Canada, apparently. They had bus tickets to Montreal and reservation confirmations for a hotel under false names." "How did they get fake identification?" "Mr. Darren has connections through his gambling activities. People who provide various services to individuals with debt problems." I thought about Beck's confident demeanor, his claims of business success, all of it built on borrowed money and criminal connections. "What happens now?" "There'll be a arraigned this afternoon. The district attorney is seeking high bail given the flight risk they demonstrated. After that, it's a matter of building the case for trial." "Will I have to testify?" "Probably. Your testimony about your wife's deception and the financial impact on your marriage will be relevant to establishing intent and pattern of behavior. She closed the file folder. Is there anything else you think I should know? Any other suspicious behavior or conversations that might be relevant? I considered telling her about the small things, Zoya's new clothes, her expensive tastes, her sudden generosity with Beck. But those seemed petty compared to the larger crimes. She changed, I said finally. Over the past year, she became someone I didn't recognize, more secretive, more selfish, more willing to lie about small things. I thought it was just marriage settling into routine, but now I think she was already planning this. Planning what? Her exit. From the marriage, from her responsibilities, from everything that required her to be honest. Detective Morrison nodded. That's consistent with what we're seeing in the evidence. This wasn't impulsive behavior. It was a calculated scheme that developed over time. After the interview, I drove to Fina's apartment. The old woman answered the door wearing a housecoat and a grim expression. Heard they caught the little thieves, she said without preamble. This morning, they were trying to get to Canada. Canada, she snorted, like running away would make the stealing disappear. I followed her into the small living room, noting the careful way she moved. 82 years old, living on a fixed income, trusting her granddaughter to help with expenses, and being robbed blind for her trust. How are you holding up, Fina? I'm angry, she said simply. $43,000. Do you know what that represents for someone my age? Your security. My independence. That money was supposed to last me the rest of my life. Now I'm dependent on my children for basic expenses. The police think they can recover some of it. Some, not all. And what they can't recover is gone forever, spent on that worthless man's gambling habit. We sat in silence for a moment. Through the window, I could see the parking lot where Fina's neighbors came and went, living their quiet lives without drama or betrayal. Did you ever suspect, I asked, that she was stealing? No. That she was lying about expenses? Maybe. The amount seemed high sometimes, but she always had explanations. What about her behavior? Did she seem different? She seemed happier, Fina said bitterly. More confident, more generous. I thought she was doing well in her marriage and career. Turns out she was just spending my money. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Dean, this is Zoya. They let me make one call. Please don't testify against me. I'm still your wife. I showed the message to Fina. Still your wife, she repeated. After everything she's done, she still thinks that means something. Does it? What do you think? I thought about 7 years of marriage, about trust and partnership and the promises we'd made to each other. Then I thought about fake funerals and stolen money and escape plans funded by an old woman's life savings. No, I said. It doesn't mean anything anymore. I deleted the message without responding. That evening, I met with my lawyer to begin divorce proceedings. The paperwork was straightforward: adultery, fraud, abandonment, grounds that would ensure a quick resolution and protection of my assets from any criminal penalties Zoya might face. This should be relatively simple, my lawyer explained. Given her criminal charges, she's unlikely to contest anything. Her focus will be on avoiding prison time. How much time is she looking at? Elder fraud and insurance fraud combined with the flight attempt. Probably 3 to 5 years if she's convicted on all charges. 3 to 5 years. By the time Zoya got out of prison, I'd be living a completely different life. What about restitution? She'll be required to pay back what she stole, but given her financial situation, recovery will be limited. The court might garnish future earnings, but that's assuming she can find employment with a felony record. I thought about Fina, dependent on her children now because her granddaughter had chosen love over loyalty, excitement over responsibility. Can I contribute to the restitution? My lawyer looked surprised. You want to pay back money your wife stole? I want to help Fina. She doesn't deserve to suffer because of Zoya's choices. That's generous, but not legally necessary. I know, but it's the right thing to do. As I drove home through the evening traffic, I thought about the man I'd been a week ago. Married, trusting, focused on work and routine. That man felt like a stranger now, someone naive enough to believe that marriage vows meant something, that love was stronger than greed. The man I was now understood that some betrayals were so complete they changed everything. Not just the relationship, but the person you thought you were, the life you thought you were living. My phone buzzed one more time, another message from the jail. "Dean, please, I love you. We can work through this." I turned off my phone and drove home to my empty house, where I could sit in silence and plan for a future that didn't include lies, theft, or fake funerals. Tomorrow, there would be arraignments and lawyers, and the beginning of justice. Tonight, there was just the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd chosen the right side of a very clear line between right and wrong, and for the first time in months, that felt like enough. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, a sterile space with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look pale and tired. I sat in the gallery behind the prosecutor's table, watching as Zoya and Beck were led in wearing orange jumpsuits and handcuffs. Zoya looked different, thinner, older somehow, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She scanned the room until she found me, her eyes pleading for some sign of support or forgiveness. I kept my expression neutral. Beck looked worse. His confident businessman persona had crumbled completely, replaced by the hunched shoulders and darting eyes of someone who'd finally run out of options. His expensive suit had been replaced with institutional clothing, and his perfectly styled hair was disheveled. "All rise," the bailiff announced, "the Honorable Judge Patricia Hendricks presiding." Judge Hendricks was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the kind of stern expression that suggested she'd seen every possible excuse and believed none of them. She took her seat and reviewed the files before her. "We're here for the arraignment of Zoya Haldenor-Calix and Beck Darren on charges of elder fraud, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. How do the defendants plead?" Zoya's lawyer, a tired-looking public defender, stood first. "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty to all charges." Beck's lawyer, slightly better dressed but equally weary, followed suit. "Not guilty, Your Honor." Judge Hendricks nodded. "The court will now consider the matter of bail." The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Amanda Chen, rose from her table. "Your Honor, the state requests that both defendants be held without bail. They were apprehended while attempting to flee the jurisdiction with false identification and significant amounts of cash. They represent a clear flight risk. Additionally," she continued, "the defendants stole over $43,000 from an elderly victim and attempted to defraud an insurance company of an additional $50,000. The premeditated nature of these crimes and the vulnerability of the victim make them particularly serious." Zoya's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client has strong ties to the community. She's lived here her entire life, her family is here, and she's never been convicted of any crime." "Her family?" Judge Hendricks said dryly. "Being the people she stole from?" "Your Honor, the alleged theft was a misunderstanding about authorized medical expenses." "Counselor," the judge interrupted, "your client was caught at the state border with fake identification trying to flee to Canada. That suggests she understood perfectly well that her actions were criminal." Beck's lawyer tried a different approach. "Your Honor, my client is a respected businessman with significant community ties. He's willing to surrender his passport and submit to electronic monitoring." "Your client," the prosecutor interjected, "owes $15,000 to illegal gambling operations and has been using stolen money to pay his debts. His business license is under review, and his assets are frozen pending restitution proceedings." Judge Hendricks reviewed the files again. "Bail is denied for both defendants. They will remain in custody pending trial." I watched Zoya's face crumble as the words sank in. She'd been counting on bail, on the chance to mount a defense from outside jail walls. Now she faced months in custody before her case even went to trial. Beck simply stared at the table, his shoulders sagging further. "Trial is scheduled for January 15th, Judge Hendricks announced. "Both defendants will remain in county custody until that time." As the bailiffs led them away, Zoya turned back toward the gallery one more time. Our eyes met, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her face: genuine fear. I felt nothing. Outside the courthouse, I met with Detective Morrison and the prosecutor. "How strong is the case?" I asked. "Very strong," Amanda Chen replied. "We have bank records, recorded phone calls, text messages, and witness testimony. The attempted flight makes it even stronger. It shows consciousness of guilt." "What about a plea deal?" "We're open to discussions, but given the amount stolen and the vulnerability of the victim, we're not inclined to be generous. Maybe reduce charges in exchange for full restitution and cooperation." "Can they make full restitution?" "Unlikely. Beck's assets are minimal, and most of the stolen money is gone. We might recover $20,000 if we're lucky." I thought about Fina, about the independence that had been stolen from her along with the money. "I want to contribute to the restitution," I said. Both women looked at me with surprise. "That's not necessary," Detective Morrison said. "You're a victim too." "I'm a victim who can recover. Fina can't. She's 82 years old, and that money represented her security for the rest of her life." "How much are you thinking?" Amanda Chen asked. "Whatever it takes to make her whole. The full $43,000 if necessary." "That's very generous." "It's the right thing to do." 3 weeks later, I received a call from Zoya's lawyer. She wanted to meet, to discuss a possible plea arrangement. "My client is willing to plead guilty to reduce charges in exchange for a recommendation of minimum sentencing," he explained over the phone. "What does she want from me?" "A character reference. A statement about her mental state during the marriage, her susceptibility to manipulation by Mr. Darren." I almost laughed. Even facing prison time, Zoya was trying to manipulate the situation to her advantage. She's claiming Beck manipulated her? She's claiming she was in an abusive relationship that clouded her judgment about right and wrong. An abusive relationship with Beck or with me? With Mr. Darren. She says he convinced her that taking money from her grandmother was justified because of his financial difficulties. And the fake funeral? The insurance fraud? Was that his idea too? According to my client, yes. She says he pressured her into increasingly desperate measures to get money for his gambling debts. I considered this. It was possible that Beck had pressured Zoya, but it didn't excuse her choices. She'd stolen from her own grandmother, lied to her husband, and planned to flee the country. Those weren't the actions of someone being manipulated. They were the actions of someone who'd chosen greed over family. "I won't provide a character reference," I said. "Mr. Calix, your wife is facing significant prison time. A word from you could make a real difference in her sentence. She made her choices. Now she gets to live with the consequences." "She's still your wife." "No," I said firmly. "She's my soon-to-be ex-wife. The divorce papers were filed yesterday." There was silence on the other end of the line. "I see. Well, if you change your mind." "I won't." The trial began on a cold January morning with jury selection. I wasn't required to testify until the prosecution's case, so I spent the first few days following the proceedings through news reports and conversations with Detective Morrison. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showing the systematic theft from Fina's accounts, text messages between Zoya and Beck discussing their crimes, recorded phone calls with insurance companies, security footage of them at banks and hotels, spending stolen money on their affair. Beck's defense strategy was to claim gambling addiction had impaired his judgment. His lawyer painted him as a man desperate to escape dangerous creditors, making poor decisions under extreme pressure. Zoya's defense was more complex. She claimed to be a victim of Beck's manipulation, a loving granddaughter who'd been convinced that her actions were helping her family. She portrayed herself as naive and trusting, taken advantage of by a smooth-talking con man. When I took the stand on the fourth day of trial, the courtroom was packed. Fina sat in the front row, her eyes fixed on her granddaughter with an expression of profound disappointment. The prosecutor led me through the timeline of events: the fake funeral text, the live stream, the confrontation at my house, my discovery of the financial crimes, and the attempted flight. "Did your wife ever express remorse for her actions?" Amanda Chen asked. "She expressed regret about being caught," I replied, "but not remorse for the actions themselves." "Can you explain the difference?" "Remorse would involve acknowledging the harm she caused to her grandmother and taking responsibility for her choices. Regret is just wishing the consequences were different." "Did she ever offer to make restitution to Mrs. Marin?" "No. Her focus was on avoiding consequences, not repairing damage." Zoya's lawyer cross-examined me about our marriage, trying to establish that she'd been under emotional distress that might have affected her judgment. "Isn't it true that your marriage had been troubled for some time before these events?" "Our marriage had problems, but they were caused by her lies and deception, not the other way around." "Did you ever suspect your wife was having an affair?" "I suspected she was unhappy. I didn't know she was stealing from her grandmother to fund that unhappiness." "Did you ever offer to help with Mrs. Marin's medical expenses?" "Multiple times. Zoya always told me help wasn't needed." "Because she was handling the situation herself?" "Because she was stealing money and didn't want me to know about it." The lawyer tried several more approaches, but the facts were clear. Zoya had made deliberate choices to commit crimes, and no amount of legal maneuvering could change that. When Fina testified, the courtroom was completely silent. The old woman spoke clearly and directly about trusting her granddaughter, about the medical expenses that never existed, about the impact of losing her life savings. "I raised that girl," she said, looking directly at Zoya. "I taught her right from wrong. What she did to me, she did with full knowledge that it was wrong." Zoya was crying by the time Fina finished testifying. But the tears looked calculated, performed for the jury's benefit. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges for both defendants. Judge Hendricks scheduled sentencing for the following month. On sentencing day, the courtroom was again packed. Fina sat in her usual spot, flanked by Marin and Hayes. I sat behind the prosecutor's table, watching as Zoya and Beck were brought in for the final time. Judge Hendricks reviewed the pre-sentencing reports and victim impact statements before addressing the defendants. "Mrs. Calix," she began, "you have been convicted of stealing over $43,000 from your elderly grandmother, a woman who trusted you completely. You compounded this betrayal by attempting to defraud an insurance company and fleeing the jurisdiction when your crimes were discovered." Zoya stood, her hands clasped in front of her. "Your defense claimed you were manipulated by your co-defendant, but the evidence shows a pattern of calculated deception spanning many months. You made deliberate choices to betray your family's trust for personal gain." The judge paused, consulting her notes. "I sentence you to 4 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 2 years. You will also pay full restitution to the victims and perform 500 hours of community service upon your release." Zoya's knees buckled slightly. 4 years. She'd be nearly 40 when she got out, with a felony record and a destroyed reputation. "Mr. Darren," Judge Hendricks continued, "you received stolen money knowing it came from an elderly victim. You encouraged and participated in fraudulent schemes that devastated a family. Your gambling addiction may explain your actions, but it does not excuse them." Beck stood on shaking legs. "I sentence you to 5 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 3 years. You will also pay full restitution and complete a gambling addiction program." 5 years. Beck would be over 40 when he was released, his business career destroyed, his debts still waiting. As the bailiffs led them away, Zoya looked back at me one final time. I saw no plea for forgiveness in her eyes now, no manipulation or calculation, just the hollow recognition that her choices had led her exactly where she deserved to be. Outside the courthouse, Fina took my arm. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For doing the right thing, for not letting her charm her way out of consequences. She made her choices. Yes, she did. And now she gets to live with them." I walked Fina to her son's car, where Hayes was waiting to drive her home. As they pulled away, I stood on the courthouse steps and looked out at the city where I'd lived my entire adult life. Somewhere in that city, there were other people making choices about love and loyalty, honesty and betrayal. Some would choose wisely. Others would follow Zoya's path, trading integrity for immediate gratification. But that wasn't my concern anymore. My concern was building a life based on truth, surrounded by people who understood that trust was earned through actions, not words. I got in my truck and drove home to my empty house, where I could sit in silence and plan for a future that didn't include fake funerals, stolen money, or women who thought love was a license to lie. For the first time in months, that future looked bright. The story ended there, on the courthouse steps, with justice served and consequences delivered. No epilogue, no redemption, no second chances for people who'd thrown away their first ones. Just the clean satisfaction of watching the truth prevail over deception, and knowing I'd chosen the right side of a very clear line between right and wrong. My condolences, indeed.